I remember the exact moment my blood ran cold without a single degree of temperature change in the room. It was a Tuesday 10 in the morning, fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped insects, the conference room smelling of stale coffee and fresh ambition. Donovan Walsh, our new director of operations, had been in the building exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Not long enough to learn where the paper towels were kept, but apparently long enough to stand at the head of a table and announce, with full chest and zero self-awareness, that the era of unnecessary international travel was officially over. "No more expensive foreign work trips on my watch," he said. He had that particular smile people learn in business school, the one that says, "I am the smartest person in this room, and I want you to know it without me having to say it directly." He swept his arm wide like he was presenting a prize on a game show, his laser pointer dancing across a PowerPoint slide that said "Streamlined Operations" in bold Helvetica. He was talking about Berlin. He was talking about my Berlin trip, the one I had taken every single July for 24 years without fail, without incident, and without costing this company a single missed shipment or a single compliance violation. My name is Cliff Mercer. I am 55 years old. I have spent more than 2 decades building the regulatory infrastructure that keeps this company legally operational across 6 European markets. I know the name of every senior official at the Bundesamt für Wirtschaft. I know which ones prefer email correspondence and which ones expect a physical handshake and a printed renewal packet before they will push a single approval button. I have been in that Berlin office in July heat and January cold. I have taken early morning phone calls from Hamburg customs brokers at all hours and solved problems that no one else knew existed. And Donovan Walsh had been in the building 3 weeks. I sat there and let him finish. He talked about digital signatures, about remote compliance auditing, about streamlining redundant travel expenditures. Someone in the row ahead of me nodded like they were watching a TED Talk instead of watching a man dismantle 2 decades of operational precision with a clicker and a dream. "Okay," I said. That was it. One word. I did not argue. I did not explain. I did not pull out the binder I keep under my desk with every regulatory contact, every deadline, every signed renewal from the past 12 filing cycles. I simply said, "Okay," the way a man says it when he already knows the ending and does not need to audition for the sequel. Back at my desk, I pulled up the travel portal and canceled the flight I had booked 6 months earlier. The non-refundable penalty came out of the departmental budget. I documented it, filed it under the new director's operational changes, and moved on. Then I drafted an email to Amber, Donovan's assistant. Amber had graduated the previous December, wore chunky sneakers to the office, and once asked me whether VAT stood for Verified Account Transfer. She was bright, enthusiastic, and had approximately zero experience with international regulatory compliance. The subject line was, "EU Operating License Renewal, Urgent Action Required." The body was clean, professional, and completely bulletproof. Per Director Walsh's delegation restructuring, I am forwarding all materials related to our annual European operating license renewal. Attached you will find the historical filing records, the current contact list for the Bundesamt, required documentation, submission templates, and all tracked deadlines. The critical renewal date this cycle is July 9th. Please confirm receipt and ensure tracking of all submission windows. Do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. I copied Donovan on the email. Of course I did. He asked for transparency. I gave him searchlights. No reply came that day. No reply came the next, or the one after. The email sat in Amber's inbox, like a letter addressed to a house that had been sold. I printed a copy of the email chain and added it to a manila folder labeled Project Archive, July Cycle. Then I added a calendar alert for July 9th in red, then a backup alert for July 7th, then a third one labeled Final Warning, Not Your Problem Anymore, because it was not my problem anymore. He had made that clear in front of 30 people with a smirk and a pointer, and I had said, "Okay." I want to be clear about what okay meant. It did not mean I agreed. It meant I understood exactly how this was going to play out, and I was done trying to stop it. Donovan Walsh had walked into a precision machine and decided that half the parts were decorative. I had 24 years of evidence that they were not. But a man who thinks every veteran is a fossil does not listen to the fossil. So I stopped talking and started documenting. The weeks that followed had a kind of grim theater to them. Donovan kept the meetings coming, morning stand-ups, afternoon syncs about pipeline velocity, innovation workshops with slogans stenciled on whiteboards, cut the excess, own the outcome. Think forward, not backward. Every session included at least one passive reference to legacy thinking, delivered with eye contact that always landed on me. I smiled each time, kept my notebook open, kept my expression the quiet neutral of someone watching a slow-motion disaster with the calmness of a man who knows exactly where he left the fire extinguisher. I started backing everything up at home. The license history, the correspondence archives, the internal audit logs, the annotated contact sheets for every regulator across 3 countries. I encrypted 2 copies onto separate flash drives and locked them in the fireproof box in my home office. One flash drive I labeled Company Records Archive. The other one I labeled Personal Insurance. The difference between those labels told you everything about where things were headed. Donovan discovered pivot tables sometime around week 4 and spent the following 2 weeks acting as though he had personally invented data analysis. He replaced the process maps on the wall with motivational prints. My personal favorite was a canvas that read, "Disruption is not a crisis, it is a choice," which was ironic because the disruption Donovan was choosing was currently careening toward a very specific financial crisis he did not yet have the context to understand. The quarterly budget presentation arrived in mid-June. Windowless room, catered sandwiches going stale at the back table, a zoom camera pointed at a screen that nobody was actually watching. Donovan stood at the front, blazer pressed, confidence polished, clicking through slides about Q2 wins and efficiency milestones. Slide 9 was the one that made my jaw tighten: international compliance travel optimization. Eliminated redundant regulatory travel. Forecasted annual savings, $55,000. Beneath it, a tiny icon of a cartoon airplane with a red circle and line through it. Then he smiled. "Let us not forget the Berlin trip," he said, pausing for effect. "Officially retired. Turns out you do not need a transatlantic flight to renew a license." He waited for the laugh. Finance gave him one. The performative kind, the kind people produce when the boss expects it and they want their budget line protected. I did not laugh. I sat in the back of the room with my coffee going cold and watched a man get applause for removing the load-bearing wall of our European operations while calling it interior design. After the meeting, someone from sales stopped me in the corridor. "Smart move, Cliff, cutting the red tape," he said, genuinely meaning it. I just nodded and kept walking. That afternoon I set a new calendar alert on my phone. The label read, July 9th. Below it, a note I typed to myself. "They will call by July 12th. I gave it 3 days of buffer for bureaucratic lag. Behind the scenes, I kept building my archive. Not out of spite, but out of something older and quieter than spite. Habit, discipline. The muscle memory of a man who has spent 24 years making sure the gears mesh before anyone notices they could grind. I saved every email, every regulatory memo, every document Amber had been copied on without ever acknowledging receipt. I downloaded the submission portal records showing that our renewal forms had not been initiated. I saved screenshots of Amber's out-of-office messages. I saved the original memo where Donovan had transferred all licensing authority to his team in writing, signed with his full name at the bottom, dated and time-stamped. He signed it himself. Bless him. He really did. I kept an offline copy of the compliance calendar I had maintained for the past decade. The one Donovan had quietly deleted from the shared company drive sometime in April. Mine had color-coded alert tiers, contact hierarchies for each regulatory body, and 3 separate deadline windows built in so that even if one was missed, there were 2 more chances before catastrophe. He had replaced it with nothing. Not a new system, not a different process. Just nothing, and called it simplification. At home in the evenings, I sat with a cup of decaf and reread the German regulatory framework I had memorized years ago. The relevant section covered license deactivation procedures. The language was exact. If the operating certificate is not renewed by the stated deadline, the license shall be suspended pending reinstatement review. All commercial activities conducted under that license shall be immediately halted. Penalties shall accrue at the rate of 130,000 euros per calendar day, retroactive to the date of expiration. 130,000 euros per day, non-negotiable, no grace period, no warning call. The Germans assumed you read the document when you signed it and penalized you accordingly if you had not. I had read it. Every word, every year. Amber had not read it, and Donovan, I was fairly confident, did not know it existed. July arrived the way a slow-building storm does. Quiet at first, the air just slightly heavier, the sky a color that has not quite decided what it intends. I came in each morning, made my coffee, sat at my desk, and watched the countdown on my personal calendar with the measured calm of a man waiting for a scheduled train. July 7th, 2 days before the deadline. I checked the submission portal, nothing initiated. I checked Amber's calendar. She had blocked the entire week for what appeared to be an off-site onboarding for a new junior coordinator. I checked Donovan's schedule, executive retreat in Scottsdale, Thursday through Sunday. I leaned back in my chair, looked at the ceiling tiles, and thought about the cargo that would be sitting in a Hamburg refrigeration dock inside of 10 days, costing the company more money per hour than most people earn in a week. Then I thought about the early morning phone calls taken without complaint. The handshake meetings in fluorescent Berlin offices. The handwritten thank you note from a German customs official who had told me. The last time I sat across from her in a slightly too cold conference room, that I was the only American she had ever dealt with who understood that regulatory relationships are built over years, not email threads. I thought about the slide with the cartoon airplane. I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and waited. The email that changed everything arrived at 4:23 in the morning our time. German regulatory bodies do not adjust their communications for American time zones. They assume that if you are operating a commercial enterprise on their soil, you are awake and prepared when they speak to you. The subject line was, License Renewal Status, Urgent Notice, Action Required by July 9th. It was addressed to Amber. I was carbon copied, a ghost echo from some legacy contact list that had never been updated, probably because no one had thought to update it, or, more likely, no one had thought about it at all. The message was brief and precise. I read it over my first cup of coffee with the particular calm of a man watching a fuse reach a very expensive firecracker. The renewal window had officially closed. Forms had not been received. The Bundesamt was initiating the deactivation procedure under Section 4.2 of the Commercial Licensing Framework. Daily penalties would begin accruing retroactively from July 9th at a rate of 130,000 euros per calendar day. A reinstatement path existed, but required in-person documentation and could take 3 to 6 weeks to process. I checked Amber's Slack status, palm tree emoji, back Monday. Responding to urgent messages only. She was in Tulum for a wellness retreat. I know this because she had posted about it twice on the company channel the previous Friday, including a photo of herself standing on a beach holding a coconut. I checked Donovan's calendar. Still in Scottsdale until Sunday. I stared at the email for a long time. My cursor sat on the forward button. I could have sent it up the chain right then. I could have called the emergency operations line, flagged it to the CFO's assistant, printed 3 copies and slid them under the appropriate doors. I was technically still employed. I was technically still a compliance professional with 24 years of experience managing exactly this kind of situation. But Donovan had signed a memo in March explicitly delegating all licensing responsibility to his team. He had stripped my access to the renewal portal in April. He had publicly announced in a budgetary presentation that the Berlin compliance process was an eliminated redundancy. He had removed me from the regulatory contact list in May. I had the paperwork for all of it. I was not authorized to act. He had been very clear about that, so instead, I did what I had been doing for months. I opened a new folder on my desktop labeled Final Archive July Cycle. I saved the regulatory email. I saved the read receipt showing it had been delivered to Amber's inbox. I saved the Slack screenshot showing her out-of-office status. I saved Donovan's calendar printout. Then I transferred everything to a fresh flash drive, encrypted it, and locked it in the fireproof box next to the other 2 drives. Then I went to work. By the time I got to the office that morning, the Berlin team had already begun noticing something was wrong. Shipment tracking was returning errors. The platform authentication was failing. Our partner logistics coordinator in Hamburg had pinged the company's Slack before 7 in the morning with a message that was polite in the way that a person is polite right before they stop being polite entirely. Hamburg office. License portal showing our account as suspended. Tried multiple login credentials. Getting an invalid certification number message. Anyone else seeing this? Donovan, who had apparently checked his phone from Scottsdale, replied within minutes. Director Walsh, probably a credential refresh issue. Try clearing your browser cache or submitting a help desk ticket. Loop me in if still unresolved by end of day. End of day. The license had been suspended since the previous morning. By end of day would mean 24 additional hours of penalty accruing, plus whatever had already accumulated. 130,000 euros per day, times however many days it took before someone in authority understood what was actually happening. Hamburg pinged again, less politely. Hamburg, we have tried 4 browsers and a direct API connection. This is not a credential issue. The portal is responding with a certification suspension code. We have 2 freight shipments flagged by customs. One of them is perishable, and then a second message, 90 seconds later. Hamburg, what is the status of the annual renewal? Was that handled? The floor around me had gotten quieter in that particular way. That happens when people sense something is wrong, but nobody has confirmed it yet. I could see 3 colleagues exchanging glances near the coffee station. Someone had pulled up the European operations dashboard on the big monitor near the window. It was showing error codes across every German and Polish branch portal. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, set the mug down carefully on its coaster, opened my notebook, wrote the date and time, and noted the first visible system failure. Donovan had still not returned from Scottsdale. His out-of-office was active. His assistant was in Tulum taking coconut photographs. The German regulatory machine, indifferent and precise as a glacier, was doing exactly what it had always done, applying consequence to inaction at 130,000 euros a day, with the quiet efficiency of a system that has never needed to raise its voice. I was sitting front row for it. I had brought my own popcorn. I had, in fact, been preparing the snack for approximately 4 months. By Friday, the crisis had grown a second head. Berlin went dark around 8 in the morning, their platform access suspended mid-session, while someone was apparently in the middle of processing invoices. Hamburg was already offline. Warsaw followed an hour later with a message that said, in perfectly alarmed English, "Internal database locked, client portal inaccessible." Are we under a cyber attack? Not a cyber attack, just a paperwork problem. One very avoidable, very specific, very expensive paperwork problem. Donovan returned from Scottsdale late Thursday night and was in the office by 9 Friday morning. I watched him come through the glass doors in a fresh shirt, tanned, looking like a man who had just spent 4 days refueling his executive confidence. He was on his phone before he reached his desk. By 9:15, the expression had changed. By 9:30, he was leading an emergency Zoom call with the tech team, asking why a single licensing issue could bring down the entire European operations stack. Our lead systems administrator, a quiet, patient man named Bowers, who had worked there longer than I had and had the particular calm of someone who has explained technical fundamentals to panicking executives more times than he cares to count, walked Donovan through it with careful, even language. The servers, Bowers said, are functioning normally. The authentication failure is originating from the regulatory certification layer. The license number attached to our European operations certificate is returning as inactive in the Bundessystem. Until the license is reactivated, every portal and platform running under that certification number will return a suspended status. Donovan stared at the screen. What does it take to reactivate it? Bowers looked at his notes. In-person documentation with the Bundesamt. Possibly 3 to 6 weeks for full reinstatement. There may be a provisional access option, but it requires original signed paperwork and a registered German legal representative. 3 to 6 weeks. The words landed in the room with the specific gravity of a number that had revenue implications attached to every single day of it. Then the blame started its inevitable descent. Donovan started with Berlin. Why had the regional office not flagged this locally? Then with his assistant, why had Amber not tracked the deadline? Then with the general calendar system, why had the shared compliance tools not sent an alert? He worked his way methodically through every possible target except the one who signed the delegation memo, stripped the access, eliminated the travel, and stood in front of a room full of people and declared the Berlin trip and eliminated redundancy. Someone in the meeting typed a message into the chat. Can we loop Cliff Mercer in? He used to manage this. Donovan paused. His jaw shifted. He said, yes, see if he is available. I received the message directly from Amber, who had apparently returned from Tulum with a tan and a mild panic attack. The message read, hey Cliff, Director Walsh wants to know if you can help with the licensing situation. Let us know what you need from your end. I did not reply in Slack. I opened Outlook, found the email thread from late March, and clicked forward. No added commentary, no message body. Just the original subject line and Donovan's own words from the memo, preserved exactly as he had typed them. All future licensing coordination shall be managed by my team. Please direct all correspondence and authority to Amber effective immediately, thank you. Then I hit send. About 40 seconds later, I heard Donovan's office door close. Not slam, close. With the specific, controlled force of a man trying very hard to appear composed, while understanding that he has just read his own signature on a document that is about to become the central exhibit in a boardroom conversation he is not going to enjoy. Late Friday afternoon, the largest European client called. They had been locked out of their purchasing platform for nearly 20 hours. Their procurement cycle was frozen mid-process. Their CFO had issued a written notice to our sales VP threatening contract suspension on 2 active agreements and a review of the third. The sales VP, voice audibly strained, ran the call while I sat quietly in the corner on what was nominally an advisory basis. I had been invited for optics. Someone thought having me in the room would signal to the client that the adults were back in charge. I did not say much. I took notes, I observed. I watched a man who had spent 4 months telling me that compliance travel was a luxury explain to a 7-figure client why their operations were frozen because of a filing the company had executed without incident every year for the preceding 24. Meanwhile, the financial reality was compounding in real time. The license had lapsed on July 9th. Today was July 14th. 5 days at 130,000 euros per day meant the penalty currently stood at 650,000 euros and climbing. The perishable freight in Hamburg was accruing cold storage fees. The Warsaw client was generating a separate breach of service complaint. The Munich partner had engaged legal counsel. All of that from one bullet point on a slide. $55,000 in projected savings. A cartoon airplane with a red line through it. I walked down to the basement that evening, retrieved the manila folder I had prepared months earlier, and laid it flat on my desk. The complete paper trail. License history, correspondence, delegation memo with Donovan's signature, email read receipts, calendar screenshots, regulatory warning email. Everything organized by date and category, color-coded, tabbed. I did not deliver it to anyone, not yet. I just set it on my desk and let it sit there, waiting for the moment it would be needed. That moment I knew was coming tomorrow morning. The boardroom felt different Saturday morning. That particular kind of charged stillness that collects before an institutional reckoning. Executives had been called in on a weekend, which in this company meant the situation had officially moved beyond the category of manageable crisis. The CFO was already at the table when I arrived, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The general counsel, Patricia Oakes, sat beside him with a legal pad and the expression of a woman who had seen this specific disaster before and found it no less exhausting the second time. Gerald Harmon, our CEO, walked in last. He set a thick courier envelope in the center of the table with a sound that landed with the weight of a pronouncement. This arrived at my home yesterday, he said. It is a formal notice from the Bundesamt für Wirtschaft. Our European commercial license expired on July 9th. As of this morning, we are 21 days into the penalty period. He slid a second document across the table. A spreadsheet the finance team had prepared overnight. Total accrued penalties, 2,730,000 euros. Daily rate, 130,000 euros. Hamburg freight detention fees, 146,000 euros additional. Munich legal notice. Also under assessment, nobody spoke. Gerald looked up. Who was responsible for this renewal? Donovan shifted 2 seats to my left. His collar looked like it had shrunk. The process was restructured in Q1, he said. Licensing coordination was transitioned to a dedicated team. It was all documented. It is, I said. I opened my laptop, turned the screen toward the table, and slid the manila folder beside it open to the first tab, March 3rd. Director Walsh's signed memo delegating all licensing authority to his team. March 4th, forwarded documents and confirmation requests to Amber, with no reply received. June 21st, regulatory warning email received by Amber's inbox, read but unanswered. July 9th, renewal deadline passed with no submission made. July 10th, portal suspension initiated. July 12th, freight flagged in Hamburg. July 14th, CRM outages across all EU branches. July 15th, CEO receives formal penalty notice. Every entry had a corresponding document. Every document had a timestamp. Every timestamp had a signature. I did not say I told you so. The folder said it for me. Gerald looked at the memo. Then at Donovan. You signed this, he said. Donovan nodded. You stripped senior compliance of its direct authority. You eliminated the regulatory travel. You ignored the deadline calendar. And now we are bleeding 130,000 euros per day. Donovan opened his mouth. Patricia Oakes put one hand flat on the table, not loudly, not dramatically, just firmly. Donovan closed his mouth again. Gerald leaned over to Patricia. She spoke to him quietly for about 15 seconds. He nodded once. Leave your access credentials with reception, Gerald said. Effective immediately. This board will reconvene Monday to address reinstatement and client damage control. Donovan sat for a moment looking at my laptop screen, at the timeline still visible on the table, searching for an error in it. There was none. He had arranged every entry himself, one signed memo and one canceled trip at a time. Gerald waited until the room emptied. He sat across from me, the way men sit when they are done performing and have something real to say. We need you back, he said. Formally, with full authority restored and compensation that reflects the actual cost of this role when it goes unoccupied. He pushed a folder across the table. Inside was a reinstatement offer with a new contract and a title adjustment. I reached into my jacket, took out an envelope, and placed it on top of his folder. My resignation, I said, signed and notarized. Effective at close of business today. He did not open it immediately. He looked at it the way you look at something you were expecting, but still hoping would not arrive. I am sorry it reached this point, he said. I stood. So am I told him. But not as sorry as the company will be when the Munich lawsuit clears discovery. I shook his hand, picked up my notebook and the flash drive labeled personal insurance, and walked out. Outside the building, the air was warm and still. I called a car to the airport, settled into the back seat, and booked a direct flight to Berlin. Not for compliance, not for regulatory filings, or Bundesamt meetings, or renewal paperwork. Just for me. I found a table at a small cafe near the Midi, ordered a proper espresso, and sat with nothing pressing to do for the first time in 24 years. Somewhere back across the ocean, a boardroom was calculating the full damage. The fine was still running. The reinstatement would take weeks. The lawyers were already billing. And the man who had spent 2 decades holding the whole thing together was sitting in a sunny German cafe, not their problem anymore. There is a particular kind of satisfaction in that. Not loud, not triumphant, just clean. Like a door closing on a room that was never properly taken care of, and finally someone admitting it by handing you the key.